It was the kind of garage no one dared to look at for too long, tucked away at the dead end of Magnolia Street, where the pavement cracked like tired skin and the air always seemed to hold a secret. The abandoned garage sat like a forgotten memory. Its once white walls had long been stained with rust and dust, its large metal door bearing graffiti that looked more like warnings than art. Neighborhood kids whispered stories about what went on in their ghosts, drug deals, maybe even murder, but no one really knew. That is, until a black Cadillac Escalade started parking outside it every morning and every evening, every single day. It wasn't just any SUV. It gleamed like a polished jewel in a rusted-out town, and behind its tinted windows sat Mr. Dorian Blackwell, the town's most reclusive millionaire, a man who hadn't been seen in public for years. Rumors said he owned half the county. Some said he was an ex-boxer. Others swore he once ran an underground fight club before going clean. But one thing was certain, he didn't belong on Magnolia Street. And especially not in that garage. Even stranger was the fact that a few days after the Cadillac first appeared, people started seeing a young black girl with him, maybe 11 or 12 years old. No one knew who she was. She wore oversized hoodies and carried a small red backpack that she clutched to her chest like a shield. They never spoke to anyone. They never smiled. They just walked into that old garage and disappeared for hours. Across the street, sitting behind her curtains with binoculars pressed to her face, was Mrs. Hargrove, retired schoolteacher, part-time gossip queen, and full-time watchdog of the neighborhood. Something's going on in there, she muttered to herself, sipping lukewarm tea. And I'm going to find out what. She wasn't the only one watching. From the laundromat window 2 blocks down, Danny, a teen who worked weekends folding shirts and wiping machines, stared in disbelief as the shiny Escalade passed again. He'd lived in that area all his life. Nothing exciting ever happened here. Until now. Yo, that's the 3rd time this week, he whispered, eyes wide. One morning, Dorian got out of the car, opened the door for the girl, and she stepped out slowly. Her eyes scanned the street like a cat in an alleyway, alert, unsure. She looked around, and for a split second, her gaze locked with Danny's through the laundromat window. Then she smiled, but it wasn't a happy smile. It was the kind of smile that hides pain, a crooked, unsure thing that faded as quickly as it came. And just like that, they disappeared behind the garage door again. Inside the garage, everything changed. Gone were the peeling walls and moldy cement. Dorian had transformed it into something surreal. Lights, canvases, bookshelves stacked with journals, an old upright piano, and something even more curious, a hospital bed, empty but made up neatly. On the walls hung dozens of hand-drawn pictures, a girl with curly hair holding a teddy bear, a man with a deep scar across his eye, and a swing hanging from a tree. There was history here, and trauma. As the girl stepped in, she took off her backpack and slowly began pulling out colored pencils, old torn sketchbooks, and a crumpled photo of a woman. She placed it on a desk gently, like it was sacred. Dorian didn't speak. He just watched her as she quietly took her seat near the window where the light filtered through a cracked panel. Then, finally, he said, "Ready for today?" She nodded and began to draw. Back outside, the neighborhood buzzed with whispers. Why is that man going in there every day? Who's the little girl? Is she his daughter? His victim? I heard she's homeless. He's hiding her. No one knew the truth. But the truth, when it finally came out, would shatter them all. Her name was Alia, but no one in the neighborhood knew that. Not Mrs. Hargrove, not Danny at the laundromat, not even the social workers who had long since stopped looking for her. To the world, she was just another face that had slipped through the cracks. But to Dorian Blackwell, she was more than just a girl. She was a memory come alive. 1 year earlier, downtown Detroit, the cold stung like knives as little Ella huddled against a brick wall, her fingers clenched around a damp, shredded hoodie that used to be pink. Her mother had disappeared weeks ago, left for work one evening, and never came back. At first, Alia waited. Then she cried. Then she ran. Now she lived between shelters, slept behind dumpsters, and drew pictures on scraps of cardboard to keep herself from going insane. She didn't beg, she didn't trust anyone, and she didn't speak until one snowy night, when a man in a long black coat handed her a grilled cheese sandwich and walked away. He didn't ask her name. He didn't try to take her hand. He just left the sandwich on the step beside her and said, "You don't have to say thank you." That man was Dorian Blackwell. Back to present, Magnolia Street garage. Leah's hand moved in smooth, practiced strokes across her sketchpad. She didn't speak much, but her art screamed the stories trapped inside her. A woman with tired eyes, a man in a black coat, a small girl running from shadows, and always the same image. A garage, with a glowing window, and light pouring out of darkness. Dorian watched her from across the room, quietly tuning the old upright piano he had dragged in weeks ago. He wasn't a musician, not really, but Alia liked music, and he had read somewhere that rhythm could soothe trauma. He didn't know how to fix her, but he was trying. Maybe because he saw something in her he had long buried inside himself. Outside, Mrs. Hargrove was on the phone again. "I don't care if you think I'm paranoid, Ruth. The man is bringing a child into that building every day. Someone needs to report this." She snapped the blinds shut and reached for her notepad. She had already started a timeline of behavior. If the police wouldn't do anything, she would. Meanwhile, Danny at the laundromat had done some digging of his own. Using a cracked tablet and weak Wi-Fi, he Googled Black Man with Cadillac plus, Detroit plus, Missing Girl plus Garage. He didn't find much, but he did find a news clipping from 2017. Dorian Blackwell, former street fighter turned philanthropist, mysteriously disappears after wife's death. Wife's death. Danny scrolled down and found a picture. Dorian, holding a baby in his arms. The caption read, "Newlyweds, Dorian and Elise Blackwell announced the birth of their daughter Laya." Elise Blackwell. Danny's heart skipped a beat. Wait, no freaking way. Inside the garage that night, Laya stared at one of her drawings for a long time. It was of a woman, her mother, but something wasn't right. Her eyes were scratched out, like Laya didn't want to see them. "I can't remember her voice," she finally whispered. Dorian looked up from the piano. "You don't have to remember everything right now," he said gently. "Some things come back when you're ready." Laya turned the page. There, she had drawn a mirror. Inside it, her own reflection. Except in the mirror, she was smiling. That smile didn't exist yet, but maybe one day it would. What Dorian didn't know was that someone had been watching the garage with a camera, and that person had just uploaded a video to social media titled, "Millionaire secretly meeting young girl in abandoned building, WTF is happening." Within hours, it went viral. The world was about to come crashing into their quiet corner of healing, and when it did, it wouldn't knock, it would explode. Every morning, Dorian Blackwell followed a strict routine. 6 a.m. wake up without an alarm, 6:30 a.m. black coffee, no sugar. 7 a.m. sit at the corner of the bed and stare at the dusty wedding photo on the nightstand for exactly 3 minutes. 7:05 a.m. open a locked drawer. Inside it, a photo of his daughter, a letter he had never opened once. Dorian had it all: a rising business empire, a beautiful wife and a daughter named Laya. But success, what had come at a price. He was always away, business trips, late meetings, deals that didn't need his presence but fed his ego. He missed her first steps. He missed her second birthday. He missed his wife's last call. The day it all changed, it was a stormy night in 2017. His wife, Elise, had called him 6 times in a row. He didn't answer. He was in a hotel suite with a glass of whiskey and a business deal that would bring him millions. The 7th call came from the police. "Mr. Blackwell, there's been an accident." His wife had been found near an underpass, unconscious, bleeding and clutching Alaya's tiny red backpack. She died on the way to the hospital. Alaya had vanished. Gone. Just like that. Years of silence after that night, Dorian vanished from the public eye. His empire collapsed. He fired his staff, sold his downtown penthouse and moved into a small rental outside town. Rumors spread like wildfire. He joined a cult. He went to prison. He lost his mind. The truth was simpler. He was drowning in guilt, and he had made a vow: if my daughter is alive, I'll find her, and if she's gone, I'll still wait for her every day. The garage ritual. The garage on Magnolia Street wasn't chosen at random. It was the last known location from an old shelter record, a place someone had scribbled her name 6 months before she disappeared off every radar. So he bought the garage, restored it, not to use it, but to wait in it every day. Dorian went in, set up the heater, turned on soft music, laid out art supplies, and sat in silence. For 2 years, nothing happened, until one morning he saw a girl stealing food from a trash bin behind the gas station. She looked like a ghost, thin, tired, bruised, but it was the eyes, those same hazel eyes. She ran when he called out, but she left something behind, a torn page from a sketchbook. It was a drawing of him that he kept going back to that alley, waiting. Then one day she came. Present day, inside the garage. Dorian looked across the table at Alaya, who now sat more comfortably in her seat, sketching quietly. He noticed she had drawn something new: a family, a man, a woman, and a girl holding both their hands. He didn't want to hope too soon, but she was beginning to remember. Outside, the whispers were turning into voices, loud, judgmental voices. The viral video had hit 500,000 views in 24 hours. The title had been changed to "Rich Man Hides Black Child in Abandoned Building, Possible Trafficking." Anger rose in the comments. Where are the police? This man needs to be arrested. Why is Nata Jane one talking about this? Across town, police station detective Marcus Delroy sat staring at his screen. He knew Dorian. He had investigated his wife's accident years ago. He also knew the child in the video, Alaya. He whispered, leaning forward. He clicked reopen case file and picked up the phone. "Dispatch, I need a car sent to Magnolia Street, immediately." Storm approaching. Dorian didn't know it yet, but everything was about to fall apart. Again, and this time he might not be able to stop it. Asterisk, the morning after the video exploded online, Magnolia Street wasn't the same. Neighbors who barely nodded at each other were now gathered on sidewalks in hushed clumps, clutching phones and coffee mugs, trading theories and outrage like gossip currency. He brings her there every day. She never talks to anyone. Why would a millionaire be hiding a little black girl in an old garage? God, what if it's something sick? Mrs. Hargrove stood in her bathrobe near the mailbox, arms crossed, victorious. "I told you," she snapped to her neighbor Ruth. I said something weird was going on. Now the whole world sees it. Ding dong, Dorian's doorbell. Dorian was just about to leave when the doorbell rang. He opened it to find a well-dressed man in a charcoal suit holding a badge. Detective Marcus Delroy, we need to talk. Dorian didn't flinch. He stepped aside and let him in. You saw the video, didn't you? Dorian said, tired. The detective nodded. I also saw her face. That little girl, she's your daughter, isn't she? Dorian's voice cracked for the first time in years. She doesn't remember. Not everything, not yet, but she's healing. Delroy sat, pulled out a small recorder and placed it on the coffee table. Then help you tell me everything right now, before this story explodes into something uglier than it already is. Inside the garage, Alia's world. Alia sat alone in the garage, sketching furiously. She hated the new looks on people's faces when she walked down the street. The whispers were louder now. Some kids had laughed and shouted, "Hey, what's your sugar daddy paying you?" She didn't know what that meant, but it felt dirty. She started drawing faster, harder. This time, her picture showed a fire burning outside the garage, while two figures inside held hands, protected in the light. She titled it, "Storm Outside, Safe Inside." Social media inferno hashtags were now trending. Hashtag Garage Girl, hashtag Blackwell Secrets, hashtag Who is the Girl, hashtag Justice for Alia. News trucks began lining the street, camera crews set up near the laundromat. Some anchors speculated human trafficking, others painted Dorian as a misunderstood recluse. But the pressure was building. People wanted action. Mrs. Hargrove goes to fire that night. Mrs. Hargrove made an anonymous tip to Child Protective Services. There's a minor living in unsafe conditions with a strange man. I think she's being manipulated. The next morning, CPS showed up with 2 squad cars. Alia was inside the garage playing soft notes on the old piano. When the officers entered, their voices sharp and cold. She froze. Put your hands where we can see them. Dorian stepped between them. She's my daughter. You have no paperwork, no custody rights. As of now, we're taking her into protective care. No, Alia whispered. No, I'm safe here. But they didn't listen. Taken as the officers escorted Alia out, kicking and screaming. The whole neighborhood watched. Some recorded, some cried. Mrs. Hargrove stood silently behind her curtain, lips pressed tight. Dorian didn't fight. He just stood frozen, heart shattering, unable to move. As the door of the CPS vehicle slammed shut, Alia's voice rang out. Daddy, don't let them take me. But it was too late. She was gone. Again. The letter finally opened that night. Dorian sat in the garage alone, in complete darkness. He pulled out the letter he had kept hidden in his drawer for years, the one Elise wrote before she died. With trembling hands he opened it. If anything happens to me, please, find her. She's scared of the dark, she likes to draw animals, and she only smiles if you sing her lullaby. You weren't always there, Dorian, but maybe this is your chance to be the father you never got to be. One final drawing on the desk. Alia had left her last sketch behind, a picture of her and Dorian, smiling safe together. Underneath it she had written, "Please don't let the world break us." Inside the cold, white walls of the county shelter, Alia stared at the ceiling. She hadn't eaten since yesterday. The food tasted like paper and the voices here weren't kind. Social workers treated her like a statistic. Other kids stared at her like she was broken glass, too fragile to play with, too sharp to go near. She didn't cry. Not anymore. She hadn't cried since they dragged her from the garage, but now, as the world turned silent, the memories came. Flashback. The night of the storm. Alia sat in the back seat of the car, her head resting against the window. Rain pounded like drums above her mother. Elise was driving too fast. Her hands trembled on the wheel. Her voice, usually so calm, was loud and frantic. "We need to go, baby. We need to go now." Alia clutched her red backpack inside. A broken crayon set, her sketch pad, and a tiny lullaby bear that played a melody when squeezed. But that night, even the bear wouldn't sing. "Where's Daddy?" she asked. Her mother didn't answer. Instead, she kept looking in the rearview mirror, like someone was following. Crash, screams, blood. She remembered the scream, the tires, the sound of glass like breaking stars, and then silence when she woke up. Her mother wasn't moving. Her hand was still clutching the backpack. But Alia was alone. She climbed out through the shattered window, dazed and bruised. A man in a gray hoodie walked past. He looked, he paused, and then he walked away. Nobody stopped. Nobody helped. The lost year. What followed was a blur. She remembered strange homes. A woman named Marla who smelled like old onions. A man who locked the fridge and shouted at night. One kind foster parent who taught her how to draw tigers, but never home, never safe. And always that voice in her head. Where is Daddy? Back to present. Her room at the shelter. A social worker named Grace entered quietly. "You've got a visitor tomorrow," she said. Alia didn't look up. "Is it him?" Grace hesitated. "They said it might be temporary. We're still checking paperwork. But they're talking about foster placement." Alia clutched her blanket tighter. "I don't want new people." Grace's eyes softened. "I know." She had turned to leave, then paused at the door. "Your art's beautiful, by the way, especially the garage one." Alia blinked. "You saw it?" "Yeah, The one with the stars inside the building and the fire outside. Powerful stuff. Aliyah stared at her hands. It's not a garage. Grace tilted her head. Then what is it? It's my heart. Meanwhile, Dorian fights back at his lawyer's office. Dorian slammed a folder down. These are her hospital records, her birth certificate, DNA test. I'm not just some man. She's my daughter. The lawyer glanced through the documents. It's a start. But because of the viral video, public opinion's toxic, CPS isn't going to back down without a hearing. How long? A few weeks. Maybe a month. Dorian's jaw clenched. She doesn't have a month. She's already breaking. That night, Aliyah dreams she's in the garage again. But it's on fire. Flames lick the ceiling. Smoke fills the air. She sees her sketchpad burning. Her hands are tied. She screams, but no one hears. Suddenly, the piano plays a melody. Her melody. And Dorian walks through the flames, reaching for her. I'm here. I've always been here. She wakes up screaming. And this time, she does cry. Across town, Mrs. Hargrove's regret. Mrs. Hargrove watched the evening news. They were calling Dorian a trafficker, a possible abuser. Then she saw the new clip, a photo of Dorian and Elise, smiling with baby Alaya. The reporter said, this latest twist now raises the question, was the girl actually his daughter all along? Her teacup slipped from her hands and shattered. What have I done? She whispered. Rain poured down over Magnolia Street as if the sky itself was mourning. The viral video had hit 2 million views. Outside the garage, yellow police tape still fluttered in the wind. Reporters no longer stood on the sidewalk. They camped there. The town had become a stage, and Dorian Blackwell was the villain in every headline. Mrs. Hargrove's hidden pain behind her curtain. Mrs. Hargrove sat alone with a glass of brandy and a faded photo album. She stared at a picture from decades ago, her own daughter, Marissa, smiling on her 10th birthday, but the smile was fake. Marissa had vanished at 14, run away, and no one ever found her. Back then, people had blamed Mrs. Hargrove, said she was too strict, too cold. Maybe they were right. Tears slipped down her cheeks as she whispered to the photograph. I'm so sorry, baby. I think I hurt someone. Elsa's daughter now, too. She closed the album and picked up the phone. She dialed anonymously. I'd like to retract a statement I made. I made a mistake. That girl, ... She looked safe to me. Happier than I've seen any child on this block. The man in the basement 2 houses down, in a cluttered garage of his own, Mr. Carlton Reyes adjusted his camera equipment. A retired war photographer, Carlton had been labeled the ghost of the block. People said he never smiled, never spoke, just watched. But he had seen something. Every morning he watched Dorian gently guide Aliyah inside. No force, no threat, just quiet care, the kind that can't be faked. And now, the world thought it was a lie. Carlton clicked through the folders on his laptop. He had photos, time-stamped, dated, showing affection, safety, healing. He plugged in a flash drive the upload. Carlton sent the photos, along with a letter, to 3 journalists he knew personally from his years abroad. He signed the email. Not all heroes wear uniforms. Some just sit in garages and help lost children smile again. Within hours, a news story broke. Exclusive, former war journalist releases never-before-seen footage proving millionaire Dorian Blackwell is the father of Garage Girl. The tide began to turn. In the shelter, Aliyah sees the news. Of the Kendra staff at the shelter brought her a peanut butter sandwich and whispered, "Turn on the TV." Aliyah pressed the remote. Her heart stopped. There he was, Dorian, but not the angry, distorted version social media had made him into. This time he was holding up one of her drawings, the one with the tree swing, her favorite. And in the background, where Carlton's photos, one showed her asleep on Dorian's lap. Safe, peaceful. Another showed Dorian tucking her hoodie hoods over her head like a father would. And then Dorian's voice came on in a live interview. "She's not a victim. She's my daughter. I wasn't trying to hide her. I was trying to save her from a system that already forgot she existed." The world responds. Hashtags flipped. Hashtag justice for Aliyah. Hashtag apology to Dorian. Hashtag garage angel. Hashtag healings in tall ways. Pretty. Hashtag she deserved love. 11 celebrities tweeted in support. Sometimes the quietest people are the loudest protectors. At Violotivist, this broke my heart. Thank you, Mr. Blackwell. At Tara Giffensynth, noise shifted, and CPS began to feel the pressure. A call that changed everything. Great. The social worker who had always been kind to Aliyah got a phone call from her supervisor. "I think we made a mistake," the voice said. Grace turned to Aliyah. "Pack your things, honey." Aliyah's hands trembled. "Where am I going?" Grace smiled softly. "Home." Dorian waits. He sat on the edge of the piano bench, the drawing still in his hand. The garage door creaked. He looked up and there she was. No backpack this time. No hoodie, just Aliyah, eyes wide, lip trembling. "Hey, little artist," Dorian whispered. Aliyah ran forward, leaped into his arms, and didn't let go. Not for 5 minutes, not for 10. One final secret that night, as Dorian cleaned up the garage, he noticed something under the floorboard where Aliyah often sat, a hidden journal. Inside her drawings, but also letters. Letters to her mom. Letters to him. And at the very end, one last page. "Dear Daddy, you didn't come to..." night the world broke, but you built something better after it did. I forgive you, I love you. Let's go home now. The town of Willow Creek had not seen a storm like this in decades. Thunder cracked the sky in violent bursts, while sheets of rain lashed against rooftops and windows like nature's fury unleashed. Power flickered across neighborhoods, and the streets emptied as the wind howled like a wounded beast. But at the edge of town, behind a curtain of dense trees, the abandoned garage remained lit from within. Inside, Michael knelt beside Amara on the dusty wooden floor, a single lantern, casting dancing shadows across their faces. The storm outside was deafening, but the silence between them was loud. It was time. Michael opened the worn leather journal, the one Amara had found beneath the floorboard, and turned it to the final pages. His fingers trembled. His voice cracked as he read aloud. October 3rd, 2005. They said I had to leave her, that she wouldn't survive, that I had to save myself. But how do you live knowing you left your own blood behind? Amara listened, breath caught in her chest. She would have been 5 today. They told me it was too dangerous, that her mother wouldn't make it, but I didn't care. I should have fought harder. I should have found her. Michael's eyes glistened with pain. Her name was Amara. Same name as my grandmother. I named her that before I ever saw her. Amara's hands clenched the journal tightly. Her voice was barely above a whisper. Is that me? Michael's face broke. All the years of secrecy, silence, Shamit poured out in the tremble of his lips and the tears in his eyes. I didn't know, he whispered. Your mother, she never told me she survived. I spent years looking. Then one day I found the adoption record. I found the photo. And I saw you. Amara's head spun. So all this time, the garage, the drawings, the gifts, were because I couldn't just show up and say I was your father, he said. Who would believe me after so long? Lightning struck nearby, shaking the walls. But Amara stood firm, staring down the man who had haunted her dreams and shaped her destiny without her ever knowing it. You're my father. I am. The words hung in the air, soaked in truth and thunder. She turned away, eyes wide, heart racing. Everything she thought she knew had been turned inside out. I need air, she whispered, and before he could stop her, she burst out of the garage into the storm. Outside, the rain drenched her instantly. She didn't care. She ran through puddles, through mud, through memory. Her whole life had been a maze of unanswered questions. Now she stood at the center, but it only felt more confusing. Behind her, Michael followed at a distance, careful not to push. He knew this wasn't a fairy tale reunion. It was raw, real. Suddenly, Amara slipped in the mud and fell to her knees, the storm washing away tears she didn't know she was shedding. Michael rushed to her side, kneeling beside her. As thunder rolled overhead, I'm sorry, he said again, his voice breaking, for everything. She looked up at him for the first time. She saw him not as a stranger, not as a ghost, but as a man full of pain, guilt, and love. I don't know what to do with this, she said honestly. Neither do I, he admitted. And in that moment, honesty was enough. They sat there, father and daughter, in the heart of the storm to broken souls, trying to find shelter in each other. The news spread like wildfire. The mysterious garage that once haunted the block was now the subject of headlines, gossip, and community forums. But what nobody expected was what lay beneath the garage, both literally and metaphorically. Mr. Raymond stood still in the center of the now empty garage, its echo bouncing off the rusted beams and worn walls. The scent of motor oil, dust, and old wood still clung to the air like secrets that refused to leave. Beside him, little Jada clutched his hand, her eyes wide with fear, but awe. For years, she had thought this place was where bad memories came to hide. But now, she realized it was also a graveyard for forgotten promises, a hidden trapdoor. The workmen had unearthed something while preparing the garage for conversion into a community learning space, something Mr. Raymond himself hadn't known about. A trapdoor locked, nailed shut, and almost rotted through. When the workers pried it open, a dusty spiral staircase led downward into darkness. Raymond descended first, flashlight in hand, his heart thudding like a war drum. Jada followed cautiously behind, her hand tightly gripping his jacket. At the bottom of the stairs was a small concrete room lined with shelves of old papers, photographs, audio cassettes, and medical files. Each one bore a symbol, Project Indigo. Project Indigo. The secret Raymond couldn't believe what he was seeing. These are files on children, he muttered. From the 1980s, medical experiments, testing, psychological conditioning. He flipped through a file labeled Subject Number 12, J.E. Lewis. He froze. Jada Lewis. The girl looked up at him with wide, blinking eyes. Raymond dropped to his knees. The implications spun his head. Jada, this is your mother's file. Jada, confused, opened a dusty binder nearby and pulled out a black and white photo. It showed a young black woman, barely 18, chained to a hospital bed, wires attached to her head, eyes swollen with tears. She was taken here. Jot, whispered. Raymond shook his head. She wasn't crazy. She was being silenced, tested on, and when she fought back, they said she was unstable. The room wasn't just a storage cellar, it was a secret archive of horrors, a vault of illegal government-sponsored experiments that had tried to manipulate minds in low-income communities under the guise of treatment. Fire in the blood. Raymond stepped back. I invested in this town to rebuild it. But my own family, my sister, she was part of this, and I never knew. Jada's lip quivered. They destroyed my mom, but she fought back. And now I will too. Raymond looked at her with a new intensity. No, he said. We will fight. Together. They gathered every piece of evidence. Photos, files, tapes. Everything was boxed up, copied, and backed up. And then Raymond did something bold. He called the press. Truth goes public the next morning. Every major news outlet was parked outside the abandoned garage. Cameras, drones, reporters, it was chaos. Raymond stood tall in front of them, Jada by his side. I came to this garage to remember my sister, he said into the microphone. But I found the truth. My sister was not crazy. She was a victim, and this town deserves to know what happened here. He handed the files to the reporters. We will not let the past stay buried. The crowd erupted in applause. Jada smiled shyly, holding Raymond's hand, but deep down she knew this was just the beginning. The sun rose slowly over the sleepy neighborhood, its golden rays spilling gently over the once-forgotten garage. The same garage that had held so many secrets now stood transformed, no longer a place of mystery, but of memory, healing, and redemption. Mr. Claiborne, standing beside Amara, wore a simple gray suit, not designer, not flashy, just a man, stripped of titles and wealth, offering something far greater, forgiveness. Amara's hand was in his, her eyes reflecting both sorrow and strength. In the yard, neighbors gathered, not with suspicion or gossip, but with casseroles, warm smiles, and hesitant apologies. Even Mrs. Delaney, who had once called the police just to be sure everything was all right, approached them with tears in her eyes and a trembling voice. I didn't know. I judged too quickly. Amara hugged her. A lot of people did. For the first time, the girl who once walked quietly behind the millionaire held her head high. She had graduated from high school a week earlier, and now her acceptance letter to Howard University was proudly pinned on the garage door, the same door she used to enter in silence. The letter wasn't funded by a scholarship or an anonymous donor. It was Mr. Claiborne who paid every penny, but it wasn't charity. It was family. Inside the garage, the walls had been painted a soft pastel blue. Photographs now hung on the boards, pictures of Mr. Claiborne and Amara fixing up furniture together, birthday cupcakes with makeshift candles, and one photo that sat in the center, Amara as a toddler, sitting on her mother's lap, Mr. Claiborne kneeling beside them both. It was the day he met his daughter for the first time, and the day her mother walked away from a man who once refused to love freely across town. The orphanage had received a major anonymous donation, but word had gotten out quickly. People knew who had done it. Mr. Claiborne. He didn't want applause or headlines. He simply wanted no child to feel unwanted ever again. 1 year later, Amara walked across the campus of Howard, books in hand. She had declared her major psychology with plans to open a center for trauma survivors like herself. Every Sunday she FaceTimed with Mr. Claiborne, who now lived modestly in the same neighborhood, working part-time at a youth outreach center. Did you eat, Dad? She asked every time. Only if you did, he'd reply. Back in the neighborhood, the garage had become something else, a community reading room. Kids came to read, paint, and sometimes just talk. There was no plaque, no name carved in stone, but everyone in the town knew what it was. It was the place where a millionaire learned to become a father. It was where a black girl learned to trust. Again, it was where judgment was replaced with grace, and above its doorway now hung a wooden sign, carved by Amara herself. Love lives here. And indeed, it did forevermore.